The alarm in the induction hall cut through every conversation like a blade through glass. I did not flinch. Around me, 100 alien cadets flinched, ducked or covered whatever passed for their ears. I simply stood there, arms folded, waiting for the noise to stop. That was the first thing they noticed about me. My name is Daniel Hartley. I am the only human standing in this chamber, and every single creature around me has been staring at me since the moment I walked in. Not with curiosity, with something closer to disgust mixed with pity. The room itself was enormous, built from pale metal that seemed to breathe with a soft hum of ventilation systems designed for 100 different kinds of lungs. High above us, a domed ceiling glowed with the light of a false sky, calm and blue, meant to make everyone feel comfortable. It did not fool me. I could feel eyes crawling over my skin from every direction. To my left stood a tall, thin being, with skin like polished silver, its limbs long and delicate, almost fragile-looking, like they might snap if it sneezed too hard. This was an Aroan, one of the more prominent species in the Galactic Academy, known for their elegance and their arrogance in equal measure. To my right, a soft, translucent shape shivered gently, its body like clear gelatin, held together by some invisible force. A Threx. I had read about them during my training. Peaceful, slow-moving, allergic to sudden gravity changes. And then there was me, a human, a being from a planet these creatures called, without any attempt at politeness, a Deathworld. I heard the word again, whispered from somewhere behind me. Deathworld. Another voice, dripping with amusement, followed it. I heard their bones break if they fall downstairs. Laughter rippled through the crowd, careful and quiet, the kind of laughter meant to be heard by the target without giving them a reason to complain. I kept my eyes forward. I had heard worse insults during training back on Earth. Compared to those, this barely registered. At the front of the hall stood our instructor, a Kelvex named Vantor, a species known across the galaxy for organizing everything down to the smallest detail. Vantor was short and wide, with a face like a wrinkled mask stretched over sharp bones, and hands that moved constantly across a floating console only he could fully understand. "Cadets," Vantor said, his voice amplified so it filled every corner of the chamber. "Welcome to the Interstellar Defense Academy. You have been selected from across 100 worlds because your governments believe you have potential. Today, we begin testing that potential." His eyes moved across the crowd until they landed on me. He paused, just slightly, the way someone pauses when they see something unexpected in a room they thought they understood completely. "Cadet Hartley," he said, "your species is new to our program. Earth has only recently joined the Greater Alliance. We have prepared special accommodations for you." Special accommodations. I already knew what that meant. Reduced expectations. The being beside me, the tall Oroan, leaned slightly toward another cadet and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "They probably need him to sit while we stand, otherwise he might fall over from his own bones." More laughter, quieter this time but no less cruel. I let it pass over me like wind against a mountain. It bothered me for exactly 0 seconds. I had grown up hearing worse from people who actually mattered to me. Vantor raised a hand, and the laughter died instantly. He gestured toward a massive door at the end of the hall, one that slid open with a low groan to reveal a chamber beyond, ringed with strange devices along its walls. "This is the gravity well chamber," Vantor announced. "Every cadet will be tested here today. Your first physical trial. Standard settings will be 0.3 of a standard gravity unit, comfortable for most species represented in this room." He turned toward me again, and something in his expression shifted into what I can only describe as forced politeness, the kind reserved for someone you assume is about to embarrass themselves. "For Cadet Hartley, given the unique physiology of his species, we will make an exception. The chamber will remain at 0.3 for his trial as well, to ensure fairness." I almost laughed out loud. Fairness, as if lowering the gravity for me was a favor. As if reducing the pressure on my body somehow leveled a playing field that had never been unbalanced in my direction to begin with. I stepped forward before he could move on to the next cadet. "Instructor Vantor," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I would like to request a different setting." The room went silent. Not the polite silence of attention, but the sharp, confused silence of an audience that thinks it misheard something. Vantor blinked at me, his wrinkled face folding into an expression of genuine surprise. "I am sorry, Cadet. Could you repeat that?" "I would like the chamber set to Earth standard gravity," I said. "1 full unit, not 0.3. A murmur spread through the crowd like a wave crashing against rocks. The tall Oroan beside me turned fully toward me for the first time, its silver eyes narrowing with something between disbelief and amusement. "You want more gravity?" the Oroan asked, his voice carrying just enough volume for others to hear. "Why would you request such a thing? Do you wish to injure yourself before training even begins?" I met his eyes without hesitation. "Where I come from, 1 full gravity unit is simply called Tuesday." Nobody laughed this time. Vantor's hands hovered over his console, frozen mid-motion, as if his instincts told him this was a joke, but his data told him something else entirely. He glanced down at a small screen embedded in his equipment, scrolling through what I assumed were files about Earth, about humans, about the strange little species that had joined the Alliance only a short time ago and had already developed a reputation nobody quite understood yet. "Cadet Hartley," Vantor said slowly, "are you certain 1 full gravity unit exceeds the comfort threshold for the majority of species in this academy, including several instructors?" "I am certain," I said. "It is my planet's natural gravity. I trained under conditions far more demanding than this, before I ever left Earth." The gelatinous Threx beside me quivered violently, a sound like a soft groan escaping from somewhere within its transparent body. "1 full gravity," it said, its voice bubbling and slow. "That would crush most of us instantly." "It will not crush me," I said simply. "I grew up in it." The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the faint hum of the ventilation system again, filling the space where laughter used to be. Every eye in the room was fixed on me now, no longer filled with mockery, but with something closer to confusion. Confusion was new. Confusion, I decided, was an improvement. Vantor studied me for a long moment, his fingers finally moving again across his console, slower this time, more deliberate. "Very well," he said at last. "The chamber will be adjusted for Cadet Hartley's trial, 1 full gravity unit as requested." He turned toward the rest of the group, raising his voice again to address everyone. "The remaining cadets will proceed at 0.3 as scheduled. Cadet Hartley will demonstrate a separate trial immediately following the first group." The doors to the gravity well chamber slid fully open, revealing a wide circular room lined with sensors, its floor marked with faint glowing lines forming a track meant for running, climbing, and various physical tests. The air inside shimmered faintly, a visual distortion caused by the artificial gravity fields waiting to be activated. The first group of cadets stepped forward together, nervous but confident, chattering quietly among themselves about how simple this trial would be. I watched them enter, watched the doors seal behind them, and felt something settle inside my chest. Not fear, not nervousness, something closer to familiarity. I had been in far heavier situations than this before I ever set foot on this station. Through a wide viewing window built into the wall beside the chamber, I could see the cadets positioning themselves along the track, stretching their limbs, preparing for what they had been told was a comfortable and manageable test. Vantor stood beside the window, tapping a sequence into his console. "Beginning gravity well activation," Vantor announced. 0.3 standard units. The shimmer in the air intensified slightly, and I watched the cadets react immediately. The tall Oroan stumbled forward, catching himself against the wall, his long limbs bending awkwardly under a force that, to me, felt like almost nothing at all. The Threx beside him sank lower to the ground, its jelly-like body flattening slightly under the added pressure. Around the chamber, other cadets groaned, wobbled, and adjusted their stances, clearly straining under a gravity level that represented less than a third of what I had grown up walking through every single day of my life. I studied their reactions carefully. This was not exaggeration or performance. Their bodies genuinely struggled under a fraction of Earth's natural pull. My mind quietly processed this information, filing it away alongside everything else I had learned since arriving at this academy. They called my planet a death world. They whispered about fragile human bones and short lifespans, and yet here they were, collapsing under less than one-third of the force I had spent my entire life adapting to. Vantor's voice cut through my thoughts. "Cadet Hartley, prepare for your trial." I turned away from the window and walked toward the secondary entrance of the gravity well chamber, feeling the weight of dozens of stares following me the entire way. Some curious, some doubtful. A few, I noticed, actually looked concerned, as if they expected to watch something unfortunate happen to me the moment the gravity increased. I stepped through the doors without hesitation. The chamber sealed behind me with a quiet hiss, and for a brief moment I stood alone in the wide circular space, surrounded by silence and the faint glow of the track markings beneath my feet. Somewhere above, hidden speakers carried Vantor's voice into the room. "Activating gravity well. 1 standard unit, Earth equivalent." I felt the shift immediately, a familiar pressure settling across my shoulders and down through my legs, the same steady weight I had known since the day I was born. My body did not resist it. My body recognized it. I rolled my shoulders once, stretched my arms above my head, and exhaled slowly. This was not a trial. This was simply home. Through the viewing window, I could see dozens of faces pressed close to the glass, watching, waiting, expecting to witness something dramatic. I gave them nothing dramatic. I simply began to move. I started with a slow jog along the glowing track, my footsteps steady and confident, my breathing calm and even. Behind the glass, I noticed several cadets exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from anticipation to something quieter, something less certain. I picked up my pace, moving into a full run, my arms pumping naturally at my sides, my legs carrying me forward with the same ease I had felt during morning runs back on Earth, through hills and uneven terrain far more demanding than this smooth, artificial track. Vantor's voice echoed once more through the chamber. "Cadet Hartley, please proceed to the strength assessment station." I redirected toward a raised platform, equipped with bars for pull-ups, a set of weighted blocks for lifting, and a marked area for jumping height tests. I approached the pull-up bar first, gripped it firmly, and began. 1, 2, 3. My body moved through the motion smoothly, without strain, without the slightest hesitation. 10 repetitions. 15. 20. Through the glass, I could see the tall Oroan cadet standing frozen, his silver eyes wide, his earlier smugness completely drained from his expression. Beside him, the Threx cadet had stopped moving altogether, its gelatinous body simply staring, motionless, toward the window. I finished my set, released the bar, and moved on to the weighted blocks without pausing to catch my breath. This was not because I wanted to show off. This was simply what my body was built for. Every hill I had climbed, every storm I had trained through, every heavy pack I had carried across uneven ground back home had prepared me for exactly this moment, whether I had realized it at the time or not. I lifted the first block, a solid mass equivalent to roughly half my own body weight, and raised it above my head with steady control. I set it down gently, then moved to the next, slightly heavier, repeating the motion with the same calm rhythm. Vantor's voice, when it returned, carried a different tone than before, less confident, almost hesitant. "Cadet Hartley, your results are being recorded. Please proceed to the final assessment." I moved toward the jumping platform, a marked section of floor designed to measure vertical height. I crouched low, gathered my strength, and pushed upward, clearing a height that, based on the readings flashing on a nearby display, exceeded the average recorded for most species tested under identical conditions. When I finally stepped back from the platform and allowed myself a moment to breathe normally, the chamber around me had fallen into complete silence. Through the viewing window, I could see every cadet standing perfectly still, their earlier whispers and laughter replaced entirely by something else. Something that looked very much like disbelief. I stood in the center of the gravity well chamber, breathing steady, muscles warm but not exhausted, and allowed myself a small, quiet thought. They had called my planet a death world. They had assumed my body would fail under conditions they considered dangerous, even lethal. They had no idea what Earth had actually prepared me for. Vantor's voice returned one final time, quieter now, almost thoughtful. "Trial complete. Cadet Hartley, please exit the chamber." I walked toward the doors, feeling the weight of 100 silent stares following me the entire way, and for the first time since arriving at this academy, nobody was laughing. The doors slid open ahead of me, revealing the crowd of cadets standing frozen in place, their earlier mockery replaced by wide eyes and lowered voices. I stepped through calmly, and as I did, I noticed Instructor Vantor studying his console with a strange intensity, his fingers tapping through page after page of data. He looked up at me slowly, his wrinkled face unreadable. "Cadet Hartley," he said quietly, "that trial was conducted at only one standard gravity unit." "Yes," I replied simply. He glanced down at his console once more, then back up at me, something shifting behind his eyes. "Do you have anything higher?" I asked. The silence that followed felt heavier than any gravity field in that entire station. Vantor did not answer right away. He simply stared at his console, his fingers hovering above the controls as though he were deciding whether to trust his own instruments. Around us, the crowd of cadets had not moved. Nobody whispered anymore. Nobody laughed. The silence in that hall felt thicker than any wall. I stood there, waiting, my breathing already back to normal, my muscles loose and warm rather than strained. I had asked a simple question. Did they have anything higher? I meant it honestly. I was not trying to prove a point in front of an audience. I genuinely wanted to know how far this station's equipment could push. Vantor finally cleared his throat, a strange rasping sound that echoed slightly through the chamber's speakers. "The maximum safe setting for general cadet testing," he said carefully, "is 1.4 standard units. Beyond that, we require special medical clearance." "Then let us try 1.4, I said. A ripple of movement passed through the crowd, cadets shifting their weight, leaning toward each other, whispering questions I could not quite hear. The tall Oroan who had mocked me earlier now stood completely still, his silver eyes fixed on me with an expression I did not recognize before. It was not mockery anymore. It looked closer to worry, though I suspected it was worry for himself rather than for me. Vantor tapped something into his console, then looked at me one more time, as if giving me a final chance to reconsider. "Cadet Hartley, I must remind you that 1.4 standard units exceeds what most species in this room could tolerate for even a few seconds. Are you certain you wish to proceed? I trained under conditions harder than this before I ever left my planet," I said. "Please proceed." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, and gestured for me to return to the chamber entrance. Before I stepped through the doors again, a quiet voice called out from somewhere in the crowd. I turned and saw a smaller alien cadet, one I had not noticed before, a Threx with a paler shade of gelatinous skin than the one who had shivered near me earlier. This one had steadier movements, more confident, though still cautious. "Why are you doing this?" the small Threx asked, its voice bubbling gently. "You already proved yourself at 1 unit. Nobody expected that much from you." I considered the question for a moment before answering. "Because I was curious," I said honestly, "and because the only way anyone here will understand my planet is if I show them, not just tell them." The Threx did not respond, but it did not look away either. I turned back toward the chamber and stepped through the doors as they slid open once more. The room sealed behind me, and I stood alone again in the wide circular space, waiting for Vantor's voice. "Activating gravity well," he announced. 1.4 standard units. The shift this time was noticeable. I felt the pressure settle deeper into my shoulders, my spine, the muscles along my legs tightening slightly under the added weight. It was not comfortable, not in the way 1 standard unit had felt like home, but it was familiar in a different sense. It reminded me of carrying a heavy pack up a steep incline, of pushing through the final stretch of a long climb when every muscle begs you to stop and your mind simply refuses to listen. I rolled my shoulders once, adjusting to the new weight, then began my movements. I started slower this time, my footsteps deliberate rather than casual, my body working harder to maintain the same steady rhythm I had shown during the first trial. Through the viewing window, I could see the crowd pressed close against the glass again, this time without a single trace of amusement on their faces. I moved into a jog, then gradually built toward a run, feeling the extra weight pull against every stride, my lungs working a bit harder to keep pace with the effort. It was not easy. I will not pretend it was easy. But it was manageable. The kind of manageable that comes from years of pushing your body past what feels comfortable, again and again, until difficulty simply becomes another part of the routine. I reached the strength assessment station and gripped the pull-up bar, feeling the added gravity pull against my arms and shoulders as I began the first repetition. 1, 2, 3. My muscles burned earlier than they had during the first trial, the strain building faster, but I continued anyway, counting silently in my head, refusing to let my form break down even as the effort increased. 10 repetitions. My arms trembled slightly on the 11th, but I pushed through it, completing 12 before finally releasing the bar and stepping back, breathing harder than before. Through the glass, I noticed several cadets exchanging glances again, this time with expressions I struggled to name. Not quite disbelief, not quite respect either. Something caught between the two, uncertain which direction to settle. I moved toward the weighted blocks, lifting the first one with noticeably more effort than during the earlier trial. My legs braced against the increased pressure pressing down through my body, my core tightening to stabilize the lift. I raised it above my head, held it steady for a moment, then lowered it carefully, feeling sweat beginning to form along my brow for the first time since arriving at this academy. I lifted the second block, heavier still, my arms shaking slightly with the strain, but I completed the motion cleanly, refusing to let the added weight defeat me. Vantor's voice returned, quieter than before, almost hesitant. Cadet Hartley, your readings indicate elevated heart rate and muscular strain consistent with expected difficulty at this gravity level. That sounds about right, I said, my breathing heavier now but still controlled. I moved toward the jumping platform for the final assessment, crouching low, gathering as much strength as I could manage under the added pressure pressing down through my legs. I pushed upward, feeling the extra weight fight against every inch of the jump, clearing a height noticeably lower than my previous attempt, but still respectable given the circumstances. When I landed, my knees absorbed the impact with practiced control, and I straightened slowly, my chest rising and falling with each breath, sweat now clearly visible along my forehead and neck. The chamber around me remained silent, the kind of silence that carries weight of its own, heavier somehow than the gravity field surrounding me. Vantor's voice, when it finally returned, sounded different than before, less certain, almost curious in a way I had not heard from him previously. "Trial complete," he said. "Cadet Hartley, please exit the chamber." I walked toward the doors, my legs slightly unsteady from the strain, but my pace remained even, controlled, deliberate. As the doors slid open, I stepped through into a crowd that had grown noticeably larger since I entered, word apparently having spread quickly through the academy about what was happening inside this particular chamber. I searched the crowd and found the tall Aroan cadet standing near the front, his silver eyes fixed on me with an expression that had shifted completely from earlier mockery into something closer to quiet calculation. I later learned his name was Saliv, heir to a noble house on his homeworld, known among the cadets for his confidence and his tendency to wager on nearly anything. "That was 1.4 units, Saliv said slowly, his voice carrying just enough volume for those nearby to hear. "Most species collapse well before reaching that threshold." "I am aware," I said simply, wiping sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. Saliv studied me for a long moment, his expression shifting again, this time into something I recognized immediately: challenge. "Your planet's gravity is 1 standard unit, is that correct?" he asked. "That is correct," I said. "Then 1.4 represents roughly 40% above your natural baseline," Saliv continued, his voice growing more confident as he spoke, as though working through calculations in his head. "Impressive, certainly, but hardly conclusive. Many species can push somewhat beyond their natural limits for short bursts." I said nothing, waiting for whatever point he was building toward. "I propose a wager," Saliv announced, loud enough now for the entire crowd to hear clearly. 2 standard units. Double your planet's natural gravity. I doubt any organism, regardless of origin, could function meaningfully under such conditions." The crowd around us shifted, Murmurs spreading quickly through the group, cadets turning to look between Saliv and myself, waiting to see how I would respond. I considered his challenge carefully. 2 standard units was significantly beyond anything I had experienced during actual training back on Earth, though I had read about extreme conditions during certain specialized programs designed for search and rescue operations in mountainous terrain. I had never personally trained under double gravity, but something in Saliv's tone, the casual certainty that no organism could handle it, struck a chord I could not ignore. "I accept," I said. A wave of gasps and whispers spread instantly through the crowd, louder this time, filled with genuine shock rather than mockery. Saliv's expression flickered, just briefly, something like surprise crossing his silver features before his confident mask settled back into place. "Instructor Vantor," Saliv called out, turning toward the older Kelvex who had been watching this entire exchange with a mixture of concern and fascination. "I formally request a special trial, 2 standard gravity units for Cadet Hartley." Vantor hesitated, glancing between Saliv and myself, his fingers tapping nervously against his console. "2 standard units exceeds our normal safety protocols significantly," Vantor said slowly. "Medical clearance would be required, along with direct supervision from senior staff." "Then arrange it," Saliv said confidently. "Surely the Academy would not deny cadets the opportunity to witness a legitimate scientific demonstration." I noticed something interesting in Saliv's tone during that exchange. Beneath his confidence, there was a thread of genuine curiosity, as though part of him actually wanted to know the answer, regardless of which side of the wager proved correct. I decided I did not dislike him, despite his earlier mockery. He seemed like someone who respected results more than assumptions, even if his pride made that respect difficult to admit outright. Vantor studied his console for a long moment, running through what I assumed were medical protocols and safety guidelines. Finally he looked up, his expression settling into something resembling reluctant acceptance. "I will need to consult with senior medical staff before authorizing such a trial," Vantor said. "Assuming clearance is granted, the trial will take place tomorrow, allowing Cadet Hartley proper time to recover from today's exertions." I nodded, accepting the delay without complaint. My legs still ached slightly from the previous trial, and my body would benefit from genuine rest before attempting something this demanding. As the crowd began to disperse, murmuring excitedly among themselves about the upcoming trial, I noticed the smaller Threx cadet from earlier approaching me again, its gelatinous form moving slowly across the floor. "You really intend to try 2 units?" it asked, its voice carrying genuine concern this time, rather than simple curiosity. "I intend to try," I confirmed. "Why?" the Threx asked again, its question simpler this time, more direct. I thought about my answer carefully before responding. "Because somewhere along the way, everyone here decided my planet was something to pity," I said. "I would like them to understand it differently before this academy is finished with me." The Threx remained silent for a long moment, studying me with whatever senses its species relied upon for perception. Finally, it spoke again, quieter this time. "My planet has never known gravity above 0.5, it said. "I cannot imagine surviving even a single unit, let alone 2. "You do not need to imagine it," I said gently. "Every planet prepares its people differently. Yours prepared you for something else entirely. That does not make you weaker, it simply makes you different." The Threx seemed to consider this, its translucent body rippling slightly in what I assumed was a gesture of acknowledgement, before it moved away to join the rest of the dispersing crowd. I made my way toward the medical wing afterward, following instructions from a passing staff member who directed me toward recovery quarters designed for cadets, following intense physical trials. The room was simple, quiet, equipped with a bed that automatically adjusted its firmness based on whoever occupied it. I lay down slowly, feeling the fatigue finally settling fully into my muscles now that the adrenaline of the trial had faded completely. My mind, however, remained active, replaying the events of the day, considering what tomorrow might bring. 2 standard units. Double the gravity I had grown up with my entire life. I had no idea whether my body could truly handle such conditions, not with any real confidence, but something inside me refused to back down from Saliv's challenge, refused to let this galaxy continue believing that Earth's harsh conditions represented nothing but misfortune. I closed my eyes, allowing myself finally to rest, knowing that tomorrow would demand everything I had. Sleep came slower than expected, my mind circling through memories of home, of storms weathered and mountains climbed, of a planet that had never once made survival easy for anyone born beneath its skies. I thought of my parents, of training grounds back home where children learned early that difficulty was simply a permanent feature of existence rather than something unusual to fear. Earth had never promised comfort. It had never promised safety. It had only ever promised that if you adapted, if you pushed through every obstacle it placed before you, you would emerge capable of enduring almost anything. Tomorrow, I intended to prove exactly that, in front of an audience that had spent months believing my planet was nothing more than an unfortunate accident of galactic geography. I finally drifted into sleep, my body slowly beginning its recovery, while somewhere across the station, word of tomorrow's trial spread further through the academy with each passing hour. Morning arrived through a simulated light cycle that brightened gradually across the ceiling of my quarters, mimicking a sunrise I had not seen in weeks. I woke feeling rested, my muscles sore in a familiar way, the kind of soreness that reminded me of good, hard training rather than any real injury. I stretched slowly, testing each limb, satisfied that yesterday's trials had left no lasting damage behind. A message blinked on the small console near my bed. Medical clearance approved. Trial scheduled for midday. Senior staff supervision required. I read it twice, then set it aside and began preparing for the day ahead. By the time I reached the medical wing, a small team of doctors from several different species waited for me, each equipped with scanning devices designed to measure everything from heart function to bone density. I stood still while they worked, answering their questions honestly, describing what training had felt like back on Earth, describing storms and mountains, and the particular ache of carrying heavy equipment across uneven terrain for hours without rest. One doctor, a quiet being with 4 eyes and skin like smooth stone, studied his scanner with visible surprise. "Your bone density readings," he said slowly, "exceed anything documented in our current database for a species of your general size and mass." "That would make sense," I said. "Higher gravity requires stronger bones simply to move around normally." The doctor said nothing further, simply continuing his notes with an expression I had grown used to seeing over the past day. Quiet fascination mixed with something that resembled genuine respect. After nearly an hour of examination, the medical team finally cleared me for the trial, though not without repeated warnings about stopping immediately if I experienced dizziness, chest pain, or any loss of coordination. I nodded along, agreeing to every precaution, though privately I felt confident my body would handle this challenge the same way it had handled everything else Earth had ever demanded of it. By the time I reached the gravity well chamber again, the crowd waiting outside had grown far larger than the previous day. Word had clearly spread throughout the entire academy, and cadets from species I had not even encountered yet stood packed along the corridor, whispering excitedly among themselves, craning their necks for a better view. Instructor Vantor stood near the entrance, flanked now by 2 additional staff members I did not recognize, likely senior instructors called in specifically to oversee this unusual trial. Saliv stood nearby as well, his silver eyes fixed on me with an expression caught somewhere between anticipation and doubt. "Cadet Hartley," Vantor said as I approached, his voice carrying a formality he had not used during our previous exchanges. "Medical clearance has been granted. However, I must stress again that 2 standard gravity units represents a significant increase beyond anything typically tested in this facility." "I understand," I said. "Senior staff will monitor your vitals continuously throughout the trial," Vantor continued. "Should any reading indicate genuine danger, the trial will be terminated immediately, regardless of your own wishes on the matter." I nodded, accepting the condition without argument. This was reasonable. I had no interest in genuinely harming myself, simply to prove a point to a crowd of curious onlookers. Saliv stepped forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "You could still withdraw," he said quietly, his voice carrying none of yesterday's confidence. Nobody would think less of you for declining a challenge this extreme. I studied him for a moment, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Are you offering me an exit, or hoping I take one? Saliv's silver eyes flickered, something almost like embarrassment crossing his features. Perhaps both, he admitted. I proposed this wager assuming failure was certain. Watching your previous trial has left me considerably less confident in that assumption. Then let us find out together, I said, and stepped past him toward the chamber entrance. The doors slid open, revealing the same wide circular room from before, though today it felt different somehow, charged with an energy I had not noticed during my earlier trials. I stepped inside, and the doors sealed behind me with their familiar quiet hiss. Through the viewing window, I could see the crowd pressing closer than ever, faces from a dozen different species, all fixed on me with expressions ranging from fascination to genuine concern. Vantor's voice crackled through the chamber speakers, steadier now, focused entirely on the procedure ahead. Cadet Hartley, please confirm you are ready to proceed. I am ready, I said. Activating gravity well, Vantor announced. 2 standard units. The shift this time hit me immediately, far more forcefully than either of my previous trials. My knees buckled slightly under the sudden pressure, and I caught myself, planting my feet wide to steady my balance as the full weight of double Earth's gravity settled across every part of my body at once. My shoulders sagged downward, my spine compressing under a force I had genuinely never experienced before in my entire life. Breathing itself required conscious effort now, my chest working harder simply to draw air into lungs that suddenly felt heavier, more resistant to expansion. I stood still for a long moment, allowing my body to adjust, refusing to rush into movement before I understood exactly what I was dealing with. This was not like the previous trials. This was genuinely difficult, genuinely demanding, in a way that commanded my full respect. Through the window, I noticed the crowd had grown completely silent, every eye fixed on me, waiting to see whether I would remain standing or collapse entirely under conditions Saliv had confidently predicted no organism could endure. I took my first step forward, my leg feeling impossibly heavy, my foot landing with a solid thud against the chamber floor. I took another step, then another, my pace slow and deliberate, my entire focus narrowed down to simply maintaining balance and forward momentum. This was not running. This was not even a comfortable walk. This was closer to wading through deep water, every motion requiring deliberate effort against an invisible resistance pressing down from every direction. I completed 1 full lap around the track, my breathing heavy now, sweat already forming along my brow despite having barely exerted myself in any traditional sense. The simple act of moving under this gravity represented exertion in itself, a truth I had not fully appreciated until experiencing it directly. Vantor's voice crackled through again, careful and measured. Cadet Hartley, your vitals indicate significant strain. Please confirm you wish to continue. I confirm, I said, my voice steady, despite the effort required to speak clearly. I moved toward the strength assessment station, gripping the pull-up bar with hands that felt weaker than they had during either previous trial. I pulled myself upward, my muscles screaming in protest, completing the motion with agonizing slowness before lowering myself back down. 1 repetition. I paused, gathering my strength, before attempting a second. This one came slower, my arms trembling visibly under the strain, my breath coming in short, controlled bursts as I fought against a weight that seemed determined to keep me grounded. I completed 3 repetitions before finally releasing the bar, my arms shaking, my chest heaving with the effort of simply staying upright under this crushing pressure. Through the viewing window, I noticed several cadets covering their mouths, their expressions shifting rapidly between concern and amazement. I moved toward the weighted blocks next, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else entirely, someone far less capable than the person who had completed yesterday's trials with relative ease. I gripped the first block, feeling its weight combine with the crushing gravity surrounding me, and began to lift. The strain was immediate and intense, every muscle in my body engaging simultaneously to fight against a combined force I had never experienced before. I raised the block slowly, inch by agonizing inch, my arms trembling violently by the time I finally cleared it above my shoulders. I held it there for a brief moment, my vision blurring slightly at the edges from the sheer effort involved, before lowering it carefully back to the ground. I did not attempt the second block. My body had reached its limit for that particular exercise, and I recognized the difference between pushing through difficulty and pushing toward genuine injury. Vantor's voice returned again, this time with a note of genuine concern threading through his usual professional tone. "Cadet Hartley, your heart rate has increased significantly beyond safe parameters. Please consider ending the trial." I straightened slowly, forcing my breathing to steady, forcing my mind to focus past the exhaustion pulling at every part of my body. "I would like to attempt the final assessment," I said. "Then I will end the trial, regardless of outcome." There was a pause, longer than any before it, before Vantor finally responded. "Very well. Proceed carefully." I made my way toward the jumping platform, my legs feeling like they were made of stone, each step requiring deliberate concentration, simply to avoid stumbling. I positioned myself at the marked starting point, crouched low, gathering whatever strength remained within me. This jump would not be impressive. I knew that already. Under 2 standard units, even reaching the platform's minimum threshold would represent genuine accomplishment. I focused my mind entirely on the motion ahead, blocking out the exhaustion, the burning muscles, the crowd watching from beyond the glass. I pushed upward with everything I had left. My body lifted off the ground, slower and lower than either previous attempt, but it lifted nonetheless. I cleared a height that, while far below my earlier results, still registered clearly on the platform's sensors, a solid, undeniable measurement confirming that my body had genuinely functioned, genuinely moved, genuinely accomplished something under conditions Saliv had assumed impossible for any living creature to endure. I landed hard, my knees buckling slightly under the impact, and for a moment I simply stood there, swaying gently, my chest heaving with exhausted breath, sweat soaking through my clothing entirely. "Trial complete," Vantor announced, his voice carrying something I had not heard from him before. Something close to genuine astonishment. Deactivating gravity well. The pressure lifted from my body gradually, and I felt an immediate, overwhelming sense of relief as my muscles finally released their desperate tension, my breathing slowly returning toward something resembling normal. I stood there for a long moment, simply breathing, simply existing without the crushing weight pressing down against every part of my being. When I finally turned toward the viewing window, I found the entire crowd standing in complete silence, their expressions ranging from shock to something I could only describe as genuine reverence. Nobody whispered, nobody laughed. The mockery from yesterday felt like it belonged to an entirely different lifetime. The chamber doors slid open, and I stepped through slowly, my legs still unsteady from the extreme exertion, my body craving rest more desperately than it ever had before. Medical staff rushed toward me immediately, scanning devices already active, checking my vitals with careful, professional efficiency. "Your readings are stabilizing," one doctor announced after a moment, relief evident in her voice. "Elevated, but within acceptable recovery parameters." I nodded, too exhausted to form a proper response, and allowed myself to be guided toward a nearby chair where I finally sat down, my body sagging with relief now that the ordeal had concluded. Saliv approached slowly, his silver eyes wide, his usual confident posture replaced by something more subdued, more thoughtful. He knelt slightly beside my chair, studying me with an expression I had never seen him wear before. "You completed the trial," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Under 2 standard units. Your own planet's gravity is only 1. "I did," I confirmed, my voice hoarse from exertion. Saliv shook his head slowly, his expression shifting into something resembling genuine humility. "I proposed this wager, believing it impossible," he admitted. "I believed no organism could function meaningfully under such conditions, regardless of origin or preparation." "And now," I asked, watching him carefully, "now I find myself wondering what else I have assumed incorrectly about your species," Saliv said quietly. Around us, the crowd had begun murmuring again, though the tone had shifted entirely from yesterday's mockery into something closer to genuine curiosity and respect. I caught fragments of conversation drifting through the group, cadets discussing what they had just witnessed, questioning everything they thought they understood about which species truly represented strength and resilience across this galaxy. Instructor Vantor approached slowly, his expression carrying a weight I had not seen from him during our previous interactions. He studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. "Cadet Hartley," he said, "I have reviewed the data from your trials extensively. I must admit, our current training protocols were designed without adequate consideration for your species' unique physiology." "I understand," I said, still catching my breath. "I intend to recommend a formal review of Earth's baseline standards within our Academy's training manual," Vantor continued. "Your planet's conditions appear to have produced physical capabilities significantly beyond what our current classification system anticipated." I nodded slowly, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction settle over me despite my exhaustion. This was not about proving superiority. This was simply about correcting a misunderstanding that had followed my species since the moment we joined this wider galactic community. Earth had never been a curse. It had simply been a teacher, harsh and unforgiving, but ultimately one that had prepared its students for challenges few others could imagine enduring. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, whispers of today's trial spreading rapidly across every corner of the Academy, I allowed myself finally to relax, my body demanding rest after everything it had endured. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new trials, new opportunities to demonstrate exactly what my species had learned from a planet that had never once made survival easy. But for now, I simply sat quietly, breathing steadily, watching as the galaxy around me slowly began reconsidering everything it thought it understood about the Deathworld Cadet who had refused to flinch. News of the trial spread faster than I expected. By the following morning, when I made my way toward the training hall for our scheduled tactical exercises, I noticed something had changed in how cadets looked at me. Gone were the sideways glances and muffled laughter from just 2 days earlier. In their place stood something quieter, more careful, as though the entire Academy had collectively decided to reconsider its assumptions about my species. A message waited for me on the console outside the training hall, requesting that I report to Instructor Vantor's office before joining the day's exercises. I made my way there directly, curious what this unexpected summons might involve. Vantor's office was small and orderly, shelves lined with data crystals and physical books from a dozen different worlds, each organized with the same meticulous precision I had come to expect from him. He looked up as I entered, gesturing toward a seat across from his desk. "Cadet Hartley," he said, "please, sit." I settled into the chair, waiting quietly while he arranged several documents across his desk's glowing surface. "I have spent considerable time reviewing the footage and data from your trials," Vantor began. "The results have prompted several important conversations among senior staff regarding how we approach physical training standards for cadets originating from your world." "I hope the conversations have been productive," I said carefully. Vantor allowed something close to a smile to cross his wrinkled features. "Productive? Yes. Also somewhat humbling, I must admit. Our Academy has operated under certain assumptions since its founding, assumptions built around the physical capabilities of species from more moderate environments. Earth was classified as a death world based primarily on statistical models predicting extreme difficulty for its inhabitants to function within standard galactic conditions. Those models were not entirely wrong, I said. Earth is dangerous. Our history includes extinction events, violent weather, predators capable of ending a human life in seconds, and diseases that shaped our evolution through centuries of suffering. Nothing about growing up there was ever easy. And yet, Vantor said slowly, rather than weakening your species, these conditions appear to have produced remarkable physical resilience, adaptability, and endurance. I considered his words carefully before responding. I think the mistake many species make, I said, is assuming that difficulty only breaks things. Sometimes difficulty builds things instead, provided whatever is being tested manages to survive long enough to adapt. Vantor studied me for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. That is a philosophy I had not previously considered applying to physical training protocols, he admitted. I intend to propose a revised classification system, one that separates a species' native environmental difficulty from assumptions about physical capability. Earth's conditions, rather than representing pure disadvantage, appear to function as an unusually demanding form of natural conditioning. I would support that revision, I said honestly. Vantor nodded, making a note on his console before looking back up at me. There is one additional matter I wish to discuss, he continued. Cadet Saliv has requested permission to train alongside you during upcoming sessions, along with several other cadets who have expressed similar interest following yesterday's demonstration. This surprised me somewhat, though perhaps it should not have. I have no objection, I said. I would be glad to share what I know, provided everyone understands the risks involved in pushing beyond their natural limits too quickly. I will ensure appropriate safety measures accompany any joint training sessions, Vantor assured me, though I suspect, given your species' apparent aptitude for enduring difficult circumstances, you may find yourself becoming something of an unofficial instructor before this term concludes. I left Vantor's office feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and curiosity about what these upcoming sessions might reveal. When I arrived at the training hall shortly afterward, I found a noticeably larger group gathered than usual, cadets from at least 6 different species standing together near the entrance, murmuring quietly among themselves. Saliv stood near the front of the group, his silver form catching the light of the hall's overhead fixtures as he turned toward me upon my arrival. "Cadet Hartley," he said, his tone carrying none of yesterday's arrogance. "I hope you do not mind the company today." "Not at all," I said, though I should warn everyone honestly, what worked for my body will not necessarily translate directly to yours. Earth-shaped humans, according to conditions unique to our planet. Your worlds shaped you according to entirely different circumstances. "We understand," said a voice from within the group. I turned to find the smaller Threx cadet who had spoken with me earlier, its gelatinous form steady and calm, despite the gathering crowd around it. "We are not attempting to become human. We simply wish to understand what principles might translate across different physiologies." I appreciated the clarity of that distinction. "Then let us begin with something simple," I said. "Breathing control under stress." I spent the next hour walking the assembled cadets through basic breathing techniques I had learned during training back on Earth, methods designed to help regulate heart rate and oxygen intake during periods of intense physical exertion. Many of the techniques translated reasonably well across different physiologies, though certain adjustments proved necessary for species whose respiratory systems function quite differently from human lungs. The Threx cadet, whose name I finally learned was Mira, demonstrated surprising aptitude for adapting these breathing patterns to her own biology, her gelatinous form rippling in steady, controlled waves that seemed to mirror the rhythm I had described. "This feels different," Mira said after several attempts, her voice carrying a note of genuine excitement. "Calmer somehow, even though nothing about my physical circumstances has changed." "That is precisely the point," I said. "Physical strength matters, certainly, but controlling your mind under pressure often matters just as much, sometimes more." Saliv, who had been practicing quietly alongside the others, looked up with an expression of genuine interest. "Is this how your species trains from childhood?" he asked. "Teaching mental discipline alongside physical conditioning?" "Something like that," I said. "Earth's history includes countless traditions built specifically around training both body and mind together. Many cultures developed these methods independently, long before humans ever imagined traveling beyond our own solar system." We continued working through various exercises throughout the remainder of the session, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the process of teaching, of watching cadets from entirely different worlds slowly begin incorporating concepts that had shaped my own upbringing into their own training routines. Near the end of the session, Saliv approached me privately, his expression more serious than it had been throughout the rest of our practice. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, "for my earlier behavior. I judged your species based on incomplete information, allowing assumptions about your planet's difficulty to translate unfairly into assumptions about your personal capabilities." "Apology accepted," I said. though I would encourage you to direct that energy toward curiosity instead of guilt. Understanding differences between species seems far more valuable than dwelling on mistaken first impressions. Saliv nodded slowly, something like genuine respect settling into his expression. May I ask you something personal? He said. Of course. Do you resent your planet, he asked, for making your life so difficult compared to species from gentler worlds? I considered this question carefully, recognizing it as more significant than it might have initially appeared. No, I said finally, I do not resent Earth. I think, in some strange way, I am grateful for it. Every challenge it presented forced humans to develop resilience, cooperation, and adaptability that might never have emerged under gentler circumstances. Our planet did not owe us comfort. It simply gave us the tools necessary to survive, provided we were willing to use them. Saliv absorbed this answer silently for a long moment before speaking again. My homeworld has never presented anything approaching genuine danger, he admitted. Perhaps that explains certain aspects of my own upbringing, certain assumptions I carried without ever fully examining them. Every world teaches its people something different, I said. Yours likely taught patience, refinement, elegance. Mine taught endurance, adaptability, and stubbornness. Neither lesson is inherently superior. They are simply different tools, useful in different circumstances. Our conversation was interrupted by Instructor Vantor's arrival, his presence commanding immediate attention from the gathered cadets. He carried a datapad, his expression carrying the same thoughtful weight I had noticed during our earlier private conversation. Cadets, he announced, addressing the entire group. Following recent developments within our physical training program, senior staff have approved a formal revision to our Academy's classification standards regarding environmental adaptation. A murmur passed through the gathered crowd, everyone listening intently as Vantor continued. Effective immediately, physical capability assessments will account for a cadet's native environmental conditions independently from assumptions about overall species resilience. Earth, along with several other previously classified death worlds, will now be recognized under a new designation reflecting genuine physical adaptation rather than simple environmental hostility. This revision would not have occurred without Cadet Hartley's willingness to demonstrate, rather than simply argue, the true nature of his species' capabilities. The Academy owes him considerable gratitude for correcting a significant oversight within our training protocols. The gathered cadets turned toward me, their expressions ranging from respect to genuine curiosity, and for a moment, I felt something unexpected settle over me. Not pride exactly, though certainly satisfaction. More than anything, I felt a quiet sense of purpose, a recognition that perhaps this was precisely why I had chosen to leave Earth in the first place, to help this wider galaxy understand my species more accurately before assumptions hardened into permanent misunderstanding. As the session concluded and cadets began dispersing toward their next scheduled activities, Mira approached me one final time, her gelatinous form rippling gently with what I had come to recognize as her species equivalent of a smile. "Thank you," she said simply, "for treating our questions seriously rather than dismissing them as ignorance." "Curiosity is never ignorance," I said. "Only assumptions without curiosity deserve that label." She seemed to consider this for a moment before responding. "I hope more cadets from your world join this academy eventually," she said. "I suspect there is much more we could learn from each other." I smiled, watching her move away to rejoin the dispersing crowd, feeling a quiet confidence settle over me regarding what the coming weeks and months might reveal. The mockery that had greeted my arrival at this academy felt distant now, replaced by something far more valuable. Genuine respect, earned honestly, through demonstration rather than argument. Yet even as satisfaction settled comfortably within me, a small, quiet thought lingered at the edges of my mind, one I chose not to share with anyone gathered in that training hall. These trials, demanding as they had been, represented only a fraction of what Earth had truly prepared its people to endure. The galaxy had only just begun to understand what humanity was truly capable of, and I suspected that understanding would only deepen as more of my species eventually joined this wider community among the stars. Weeks passed quickly after that day, filled with a steady rhythm of lessons, tactical exercises, and continued physical training that gradually became less about proving anything and more about genuine growth, both for myself and for the cadets who had begun joining our informal sessions each morning before official classes began. Word of Earth's revised classification had spread well beyond our academy, apparently reaching various governing bodies across the wider alliance responsible for overseeing military and defense training standards throughout known space. I received occasional messages from officials I had never met, requesting additional information about human physiology, about Earth's environmental conditions, about training methods that had produced such unexpected resilience among our species. I answered each request honestly, careful never to exaggerate or diminish anything about my homeworld. Earth was neither a curse nor a blessing. It simply was what it was, a demanding, unpredictable place that had shaped its inhabitants through countless generations of hardship into something the wider galaxy had never quite anticipated. One morning, as our small training group gathered in the hall before sunrise simulation lighting had even fully activated, Instructor Vantor arrived unexpectedly, his expression carrying a seriousness that immediately quieted the usual pre-training chatter among the assembled cadets. "Cadets," he announced, "today marks the final physical assessment before your formal placement evaluations begin. Senior Command has requested a demonstration exercise, one intended to showcase the progress made throughout this term's training." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the group. Final assessments carried significant weight within the academy, often determining which specialized programs cadets would eventually enter following graduation. "The exercise will take place within the gravity well chamber," Vantor continued, "though today's trial will differ somewhat from previous individual demonstrations. Senior Command has requested a cooperative exercise, one designed to test how cadets from different species work together under challenging environmental conditions." I glanced toward Saliv, who returned my look with an expression of quiet determination. Over the past weeks, our relationship had transformed considerably, from its awkward, competitive beginnings into something resembling genuine friendship, built through countless hours of shared training and honest conversation about our respective worlds. "The chamber will be set to 0.7 standard units," Vantor explained, "a level manageable for most species represented among you, though still demanding enough to test genuine cooperation and endurance. 0.7 represented a careful compromise, low enough that species like Mira's could reasonably participate without excessive strain, yet high enough to present genuine challenge for everyone involved." I appreciated the thoughtfulness behind this decision, recognizing it as a direct result of everything we had all learned together over these past weeks. We made our way toward the familiar chamber entrance, the crowd of observers considerably smaller than during my earlier individual trials, though still substantial enough to fill the viewing area comfortably. This felt different from those earlier demonstrations, less like a spectacle, more like genuine assessment among peers who had grown to understand and respect each other's differences. The chamber doors slid open, and our group entered together, spreading out along the familiar circular track. I noticed Mira positioning herself near the front, her gelatinous form steady and confident despite the challenge awaiting us. Saliv stood beside me, his silver limbs relaxed rather than tense, a stark contrast to his posture during our very first encounter weeks earlier. "Ready?" Vantor's voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "Activating gravity well, 0.7 standard units." The familiar pressure settled across my body, lighter than what I had grown accustomed to during my earlier individual trials, though I noticed several cadets around me immediately tensing under the added weight. This was, after all, still more than double what many of their homeworlds had ever prepared them to endure. Our exercise involved navigating a series of obstacles together, requiring genuine teamwork rather than individual competition. Certain barriers required combined strength to move. Others demanded coordination between cadets with different physical capabilities working in tandem to overcome challenges no single species could manage alone. I found myself naturally taking a supportive role during the early obstacles, offering guidance to cadets struggling with the added gravity while still contributing my own physical strength where needed. Mira, despite her species' typical vulnerability to increased gravity, demonstrated remarkable determination, her earlier training with breathing techniques clearly paying dividends as she pushed steadily through each challenge alongside the rest of us. Saliv, meanwhile, revealed hidden strengths of his own, his species' natural agility proving useful during obstacles requiring precise balance and careful movement rather than raw physical power. Watching him navigate a particularly tricky section of narrow beams with practiced grace reminded me of something important. Every species carried unique strengths, shaped by their own particular homeworld, strengths that Earth's brutal conditions had never required humans to develop in quite the same way. We reached the final obstacle together, a massive barrier requiring combined effort from every member of our group simultaneously. I positioned myself alongside several other stronger cadets, bracing against the heavy structure, while others worked to guide its movement through a narrow passage ahead. The effort required genuine coordination, careful communication between species whose instincts and communication styles differed significantly from one another. Yet somehow, through weeks of shared training and growing mutual understanding, we managed to synchronize our movements effectively, gradually working the barrier through its designated path, until finally, with one final combined push, it slid into position, completing the obstacle course entirely. A moment of stunned silence followed, broken quickly by scattered cheers from cadets too exhausted to manage anything more enthusiastic than relieved laughter. I felt a genuine sense of accomplishment settle over me, different from the satisfaction I had experienced during my earlier individual trials. This felt shared, collective, built through genuine cooperation rather than individual demonstration. "Exercise complete," Vantor announced, his voice carrying clear approval. "Deactivating gravity well." The pressure lifted gradually from our bodies, and I felt the familiar relief wash over the entire group as our muscles finally relaxed from the sustained effort. Cadets began congratulating each other, exchanging exhausted but genuine expressions of camaraderie that would have seemed impossible during those first tense days when mockery and suspicion had defined most interactions between different species within the academy. As we made our way toward the chamber exit, Saliv fell into step beside me, his expression thoughtful despite obvious exhaustion. "Do you remember our first conversation?" he asked quietly, "when I mocked your species so carelessly?" "I remember," I said. "I find myself grateful now," Saliv continued, "that you chose demonstration over argument. Had you simply told me I was wrong, I doubt I would have believed you. Watching you prove it directly changed something within my understanding that mere words never could have touched." "Sometimes," I said, "the only way to correct an assumption is to show rather than tell. Words can be argued against. Results are considerably harder to dismiss." We exited the chamber together, joining the rest of our group as they gathered near the observation area, discussing the exercise with genuine enthusiasm, rather than the guarded suspicion that had characterized our earliest interactions. Instructor Vantor approached our group, his expression carrying clear satisfaction. "This exercise," he said, addressing everyone present, "demonstrates precisely what this academy hopes to achieve among its cadets: understanding, cooperation, and genuine respect built through shared experience rather than superficial assumption." He turned toward me specifically, something like genuine warmth entering his usually formal demeanor. "Cadet Hartley, your presence within this academy has prompted changes extending well beyond simple classification adjustments. You have helped an entire generation of cadets reconsider assumptions that, frankly, should have been questioned long before your arrival." I nodded, accepting his words with quiet appreciation, though privately I recognized that this transformation had never truly been about me individually. It had been about demonstrating clearly and honestly that difficulty and disadvantage were not always the same thing, that a species shaped by hardship might emerge carrying strengths others could never anticipate. That evening, as I sat alone in my quarters reflecting on everything that had transpired since my arrival at this academy, I found my thoughts drifting back toward Earth, toward the countless generations of humans who had endured storms, disease, conflict, and countless other challenges throughout our species' long history. None of them had known, during their own struggles, that their resilience would eventually help reshape an entire galaxy's understanding of what it truly meant to survive and thrive under difficult circumstances. The mockery I had encountered upon my arrival felt like a distant memory now, replaced by genuine friendships built across species boundaries that had once seemed insurmountable. Yet even as satisfaction settled comfortably within me regarding everything accomplished during these past weeks, a quieter, more private thought lingered at the edges of my consciousness. This academy, this galaxy, had only witnessed a small fraction of what humanity truly represented. They had seen physical endurance, adaptability under pressure, and a willingness to demonstrate rather than simply argue our worth among the stars. But Earth's true legacy extended far beyond simple physical resilience. Our history included innovation, born from necessity, cooperation forged through shared struggle, and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried our species through circumstances that might have ended weaker civilizations entirely. They had called Earth a death world, a place defined by danger and hardship rather than comfort and ease. They were not entirely wrong, yet what they had failed to understand until demonstration finally corrected their assumptions was that danger and hardship, faced honestly and repeatedly across countless generations, produced something far more valuable than mere survival. It produced people capable of enduring almost anything, adapting to nearly any circumstance, and ultimately thriving in conditions that might have seemed impossible to species shaped by gentler, more forgiving worlds. I closed my eyes that night feeling genuinely content, knowing that whatever challenges awaited humanity, as we continued integrating into this wider galactic community, we carried with us lessons learned across countless generations of hardship, lessons that had prepared us, whether the galaxy fully understood it yet or not, for whatever difficulties still lay ahead among the stars. Earth had never promised its children an easy existence. It had only ever promised that if we endured, if we adapted, if we refused to surrender to circumstances beyond our control, we would emerge from that struggle carrying strength few others could truly comprehend. The galaxy was only beginning to understand exactly what that meant.